Right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the JW3 Friday briefing. Just in case there are people on the call that don't know me, I'm JW3, I head up adult education at JW3, and a special welcome to our guest this morning, Mike Prashker. He's asked if you would keep your screens on if you can, so that he can see you. And he's also said he'd prefer to hear the questions from you. So instead of putting them in the chat, I'm going to do as we did a couple of months ago, and you will be allowed to speak. So when you have a question ready, when we get to that point, it's if you can find the little raised hand icon, that's great. If you can't, unmute yourself, and I will take note. Even if I re-mute you, I will call on you. And I think that's all I need on the catalyst bit. So, as you know, since October the 7th, we've provided opportunities to raise awareness for the hostages and opportunities for us to connect together with panels, lectures and get-togethers at JW3 itself, along connecting with Israel directly through these Friday briefings and occasionally the webinars like we ran on Sunday. And we will continue to do so as long as there is any need and request for that. So our presenter this morning actually spoke on a panel at JW3 not very long ago, only a few weeks, which led to me asking him to join us this morning, which he kindly agreed to do from a very hot Israel. So let me just bring Mike on so you can see him. Mike leads the London Initiatives, which is a convener of accomplished leaders from Israel, World Jury, and other outstanding international change makers who all share a deep commitment to the State of Israel as envisaged in the Declaration of Independence. He was previously the founding director of Mechadim, the Institute for Advancement of Shared Citizenship in Israel. Mike, welcome. It's not an easy task we ask of you after yet another hard week in Israel. So please share with us what is uppermost on your mind this morning, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. Thanks for inviting me. Lovely to see you again, and good morning, everybody. It's funny, Judy and I had a few minutes before the call, and she said that because it's a lovely sunny day in London, there might be less people on the call. And my response was, as an Israeli, because I've been in Israel for 45 years, there'll be more people on the call because it's sunny and no one can bear to be outside. So it just shows that I've been in Israel a long time. So just to introduce myself, my name is Mike Prashker. My parents might be known to some of you, stalwart members of the community, Londoners, Rosalind and Ronnie Preston from Stanmore. I myself moved to Israel when I was 18, so it's a very long time ago, 45 years ago. And since then, I've done some of the things that Judy said, and I've got a family and 3 wonderful children. So just Judy, to go back to that awful morning, there are a few things that stick in my mind. Our son, our 3 children are 28 daughter, 24 son, and 18 daughter. And our son, who served in the paratroopers along the Gaza border for much of that service, was staying over. He's a student at the Hebrew University. And as it started, the sirens, and we turned on the television, and I've got goosebumps as I speak about it, he came down and I saw his face, because his face was, and then he said, Abba, this can't happen, because whenever a shepherd moved a few sheep anywhere near the border, we were there. This can't happen. It then turned into really the first time in 45 years that I have, and that includes fighting in the Lebanon War, being in Beirut in 1982, and everything that Israelis gone through over 45 years. It was the first morning in which I thought, oh my God, what have I done? Because I had to take a ton to get his army equipment in Jerusalem. We live in Kiryat Omer outside Tel Aviv. And it was a horrible drive. And then I took him that evening to a collection point near Rehovot, and then he went down south into the kibbutzim that night, and it was just horrible. Thank God he's now, he was in the army for 4.5 months, and he's now back in university. But Judy, it was just horrible, and I thought, oh my God, what have I done to my poor children? Which is a silly thought, of course, but I do feel, as in so many areas, that our generation has let young people down badly, and that weighs on me heavily. I do want to say one, maybe Judy, I hope, and Judy, you'll interrupt. We've known each other a long time, so you'll interrupt if this isn't useful and it's not what you want. So you know what, I think I'd like you to remain there, Judy, on the screen, so that I've got that sense. I'm sure you'll know how to control me. I said, and it's harsh, I mean, I am a passionate Zionist, as you said, Judy, in your generous introduction, committed to Israel's national homeland, to the Jewish people, ever fairer to all its citizens, and as distant as it now seems, committed to secure peace and reasonable accommodation with decent Palestinians under decent leadership. But I said on the 7th of when we the event at JW3 about the 7th of October, that for it to unfold as it did, apart from having the ghastliness, the complete and utter ghastliness of Hamas and their barbarity, and the fact that since Israel left Gaza, instead of building universities and schools, they dug tunnels. So setting that aside, when it comes to our responsibility, I said, and I stand behind it, that the 7th of October couldn't have unfolded as it did without a prevalent racism among Jewish Israelis, this whole start-up nation arrogance that really kind of is its kind of essence is Jews are too clever for the 7th of October to happen, and Arabs are too stupid to do it. And the second thing is connected to the process, unfortunately, of misogyny and of male-dominated everything in this government and increasingly in previous governments, because women were continually not listened to before the 7th of October by men. That includes 18-year-old girls who had been in the army for 2 weeks, who came home and told their parents that after the Chag there was going to be a war. So without racism and misogyny, two universal evils, which unfortunately have infected much of current Israeli leadership and society, then the 7th of October might still have happened, because Hamas is ghastly, but maybe with very different results. Am I meant to speak now, Judy, or
sorry, you want me to? Let's have a conversation. You're absolutely right. Okay. So let's turn now to today and this week. So over the last 7, 8, nearly 9 months, we've gone through getting some hostages out, not getting the rest out, knowing that a lot of them are no longer alive, but still knowing that there are some there. So living with that and raising awareness and trying to ensure the government does everything it can, and the world. family life has gone along and you're living somewhere where you're aware of what's going on all the time. And meanwhile, we've got the north starting up, and I think we're less aware of what happens up there, especially if we're not following an Israeli station or paper. I'm throwing a lot at you, so you can choose which ones you want to address. And then the protests start up again. We have a lot of visual aids in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, especially highlighting the hostages, making sure that they put pressure on Netanyahu in particular and the whole government. None of which seems to do an awful lot from our point of view here. Do you feel the same? Is it that we've had people on Fridays that have been so depressed and can't see any hope, and we've had others who have been very hopeful?
Right. Well, firstly, thank you, Judy. So, firstly, in my line of work, which is making social change and societal change and advancing to the extent I can in my lifetime, Israel as envisaged by the founders. I am overall optimistic because of the trajectory, and I want to speak about the overall trajectory, but obviously I'm desperately worried. I wrote recently in a piece that some of you might want, if you've got the inclination to look at in Fathom, a piece about the connection between social cohesion, how you shape a better shared future for all citizens of a given country, Israel, and the issue of resilience and the issue of trust. And one of the things that we're suffering from terribly in Israel is a lack of trust in any number of directions. Trust between different communities, trust between citizens and state organizations and elected leaders, trust even between the first, second, and third sectors, between business and civil society and government. But that's a more complex issue. But one of the things that certainly as we go forward, we need to do in order to be a stronger society is to rebuild trust. I would just, however, say, and we were talking about, I said, when we talked beforehand, I was talking about DNA, the DNA of British democracy, and why I think British democracy is so robust and mature. I know from there now it might look differently, but I think I'm right. One of the reasons is that people don't trust people absolutely. Trust to a certain degree is very, very important to a healthy society, but blind trust, unearned, is what dictators demand. And healthy skepticism, which the British are so good at, okay, is a much, much better trait for being a citizen in a robust democracy rather than finding oneself a subject in a dictatorship. So I think that we have a lot of work to do. I'm going to say in a second, just to be less abstract, what my co-founder, Samik Davis, and I are, who's known to some of you, and I are going to do about all this now. But I do want to talk about, because none of us wants to be depressed on a Friday morning, the overall trajectory of Israeli society. And I've written about this in my book, A Place for Us All, and I'm quite at odds with a lot of the pessimists, and also especially pessimists from the left. And the left, of course, specializes in pessimism. When we look back from 1948, and I'll do this in 3 minutes, not 15, I mean, Israel was an incredible democratic surprise. I mean, the fact that you had, 3 Arab members of Knesset, the war's still going on, the War of Independence, and you've got 3 Arab Knesset members. Israeli women got the vote 20 years before Swiss women. That's not unsurprising. And and this is, I think, a key point, if you speak to representatives of the diverse communities that comprise Israeli society, and that is, religious and secular, and Ashkenazi and Mizrahi, and 20% Arab citizens of Israel, overwhelmingly communities are feeling and doing better than they were 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago in very many ways, in terms of their opportunities and their sense of belonging. And I can tell you, we have an 18-year-old daughter in the army now. She's serving in an army which is a much safer place for young women than the army I served in 40 years ago. And I met yesterday with a senior colleague who is gay, and it's, the progress of the LGBTQ community, and I don't even want to take pride in that because it's so, in my mind, elementary, but it's not elementary in Israel, given its demography, history, and geography. So we've made a lot of progress, and I do think that a lot of the current crisis and the democratic coup, the attempt by the government to repress Israeli democracy, which I believe is connected to the security crisis and the way it evolved. And the military was saying for a year, we're strategically weak, our enemies can see opportunity. Everyone was saying that, and they wouldn't listen. But a lot of the democratic crisis is pushback to progress. And I think that change makers like myself need to understand that people who like things as they were don't like change. I mean, thank goodness I missed the debate last night live in the American presidential elections. Bad enough I saw the highlights this morning. Okay, but to a large extent, I think President Trump is a response to a black man in the White House that lots of white Americans just weren't ready for. So, we've made a lot of progress in Israel. The organization I founded has integrated over 1,000 Arab teachers in Jewish schools, teaching math, English, and science. That's healthy normality, but it's not attractive normality to quite a lot of people. And so there we go. In terms of what Mick and Sir Mick Davis and I are going to do now, we believe that there are three imperatives that need to be worked on, and we think they're interconnected. They're like a three-legged stool, if you will. One of them is mature liberal democracy. It's the culture of democracy. It's not just the mechanisms. The second is a fairer society, a society that provides greater opportunities for all citizens of all backgrounds. It's kind of, basic decency and sense, a fairer society. And the third thing, which has been ignored for decades, also, by the way, and here's a mea culpa by myself, not completely, but too much, is the issue of secure peace. However ghastly October the 7th is, and however despicable Hamas is, and we can never reach any kind of agreement with them or Palestinians who don't recognize Israel as the national homeland of the Jewish people and our right to exist. But we have to push on to work for secure peace, and we have to reignite that hope, and also peace as a Jewish and Israeli value and a Zionist value. We can't be even perceived as obstacles to peace. So our thinking is that, without going into the minutiae of the change strategy, that if we bring together very, very accomplished figures, whether in philanthropy or business, institutional or public intellectuals or political strategists, if we bring them together and point them in the right direction to advance mature democracy, societal fairness, and secure hope for secure peace, then that will be very good. And that by doing it together in equal partnership between Israelis of all backgrounds and world Jewry, that will be really good for overcoming misunderstandings and strengthening partnership. So that's what we're going to spend the next 5 or so years, if all is good and we're healthy, focused on.
That's great because it's practical and it's positive and it gives hope. Linda, I'm going to turn to you. If you can unmute yourself.
Morning. It's so lovely to see you because we know your parents very well. Me through Wheatser, my husband through golf.
Lovely.
So it was lovely. Just want to say, having the compulsory conscription of the ultra-Orthodox into the army, is it going to be difficult to integrate them?
I don't. Hi, Linda. It's a very, very good question, and it's a very timely question, and it's connected to rights and obligations and how we build sustainable society, let alone protect ourselves. It is going to be difficult. It needs to be done, I think, sensitively, but it now has to be done. I think that I had a long conversation yesterday with somebody who knows a great deal about this, about separate units because a lot of ultra-Orthodox Israelis are really not interested in broad interaction with people like myself, and my wife less. That is going to have to be taken into account to be successful. We can't force people into a place they can't be, but they're going to have to be. They're going to have to get behind this. I think we're going to have to talk about some combination of compulsory, military, and civic service, because we also have to include Israel's Arab citizens, and they're not going to. Nobody wants them, including them, including Jewish Israelis, for them to do military service, although quite a lot, some already do, and Druze do, but the mass are not going to. So we need to have those alternatives. But again, then it's going to come back to building trust to be able to do these things together. It's certainly got out of control. I mean, Ben-Gurion agreed to 400 Haredim studying Torah full-time, and it's now around 50,000, and they're not all studying, and the security burden has become impossible, and the resentment is terrible. So there's going to be a lot of movement on that going forward, and a lot of it's going to be very, very unpleasant. I sat in a traffic jam yesterday for 2 hours because there was a protest on my way home by Haredim who don't want to recruit. And it's very interesting. You can be in a traffic jam. For me, I can be in a traffic jam for 2 hours and be furious at Haredim, or I can be in a traffic jam for 2 hours because families of hostages are blocking the road and go and join them. It's a very different traffic jam. Or democracy protesters, park the car and go and join them. So, we're a very, very fractured society. So it's going to be very difficult. So it's got to be kind of firm but sensitive.
Thank you. Jacqueline, if you unmute yourself, I'll bring you on.
Yes, I'm unmuted. I just wanted to ask about the North. We hear fragments here about what's going on up there. And we hear about the IDF now being moved, parts of the IDF being moved up north. It's a very worrying situation. What's going to happen? I mean, nobody has a crystal ball,
Yeah, Jacqueline, well, I mean, you're absolutely right. And it's very, very worrying. I think what is going to happen, but again, Jacqueline, you have to remember I have a child in the reserves in the paratroopers, so it's very hard for me to separate what I think is going to happen to what I hope is going to happen.
Well, yes.
I think, firstly, there are still 50,000 Israelis who are evacuated from the first few kilometers, and that area is being hit the whole time, like houses in Metula and other areas, and we're hitting them and they're hitting us. It's limited, but it's not insignificant, and it's escalating. Israel, according to the news, has moved 3 or 4 divisions up north. 3 or 4 divisions are a major part of our offensive ability. I think nobody wants a full-scale war. That's what people are saying, because there'll be very little less left of Lebanon, and the Lebanese, who aren't Hezbollah, are definitely saying they don't want to war. There'll be great damage and much more loss of life, I'm afraid to say, in Israel, because Hezbollah is several times more powerful than Hamas. And we don't know what Iran will do, but there's other forces as well in Iraq.
Syria,
saying that they're going to join in.
Yes, yes.
Israel. Now, for me, again, this is my position. My position is that the idea of total victory in Gaza is ridiculous. That's Netanyahu. You know, that's populist, good for Fox or the Israeli equivalent. That's not the real world, because you're not going to stamp out every last terrorist. And we need the hostages home, alive or dead. That is the top. I mean, you know, this is Jacqueline. This is so close to everybody. I mean, apart from the people I know who were murdered on the 7th of October, my accountant's nephew is a hostage. His sister is my bookkeeper who works with him. You know, this is, and yesterday I phoned him about something I needed personally. I said, Chezi, I've got no idea how to start a conversation with you. How can I have a conversation about, you know, whatever it was, my tax return? What am I going to talk to you? You know, it's impossible. So my position, and the opinion polls seem to say that this is the popular position, okay, is to commit to ending the war for all of the hostages and pay a horrible price also in giving back, you know, all of the awful people in our jails. Okay, and if that ends, Hezbollah ends, the north ends. Now, the situation is that, and I don't want to be accused here of false equivalency, they're different people and they've done different things to their peoples, okay? But Sinwar and Netanyahu both have an interest in the war continuing.
Yeah.
Okay, because if the war ends, then elections loom, and for Sinwar, if the war ends, then, you know, he's done. So, or if he doesn't get a commitment, the war ends. So that we're in this kind of awful place, and that's what I hope will happen. What kind of leverage the Americans use and have, we're also in this awful situation where, for some on the right, in this government, certainly Netanyahu to an extent, but on the right, the worse Israel's relationship is with the world is, the more it plays into their narrative of everyone is against us. And, you know, so it's us against everybody.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And that brings us very nicely to 9:30. But just a final word, Mike. We always ask about Netanyahu and whether you think there will be elections anytime soon, whether it has to wait until the end of the war. And
Well,
which could be a long time.
we live in a remarkably resilient democracy because it hasn't been destroyed over the last 15 years. But we don't live in a mature democracy because just this week there was a state, there's been an investigation into a submarine deal that Netanyahu, the judges are saying did behind the backs of the security establishment with very, very unpleasant accusations. I mean, in Britain, we wouldn't be having this conversation because as soon as that report landed, but on the other hand, we wouldn't be having that conversation because it's been 6 or 7 years since, 5 or 6 years since criminal charges were first were first placed against Netanyahu. So, in a mature democracy, you're not having these conversations because someone with that amount of suspicion and charges and, is just not there. But, to be noted, this is happening in Israel. This is happening in America. Okay, where a convicted felon looks likely to be president. We are in a very, very, very frightening place. What I can tell you is that we are not giving up. What I can tell you is that when Mick and I kind of did the math, when you put together the weight of world juries, liberal inclinations, resources, determination, motivation, and the liberal democratic inclinations of very, very many Israelis, all of whom together understand that our futures are interconnected. And God forbid Israel goes off the democratic spectrum. That's terrible for all of us in any number of ways. And that when Israel is pushing forward, determined, however ghastly those around us are, whenever Israel is pushing forward on democracy, fairness, and peace, that is a much more attractive and stronger proposition. And our vision is of world Jewry and like-minded Israelis, or like-minded members of world Jewry and Israelis who share that proposition, not being in separate lanes, but merging and moving that agenda forward together. And that's what we're going to do. And I can only say that we don't intend to stop. And there are lots and lots and lots of other good people. And we will just push forward. And that's the way it's always been in the world. And that's the way it will always be.
Thank you so much. That's a brilliant note to finish on. We wish you all the luck with the London initiative, and of course that your children stay safe. And
thank you all so much. Have a lovely weekend and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Thank you all for coming. And next week we'll have Sarah Malley, and look forward to seeing you then. Mike, look forward to seeing you in London soon. Take care, everyone. Bye.